Park Minjun had a very simple philosophy when it came to surviving corporate life. Be invisible. Not metaphorically invisible. Not blend in with the wallpaper invisible. No, Minjun aimed for the kind of invisibility usually reserved for ghosts, sock-eating dryer gremlins, and that one coworker whose name nobody remembered despite having worked at the company for 11 years. He arrived at exactly 8:47 a.m. every day, early enough to seem dedicated, late enough to avoid the morning small-talk ambush in the elevator. He ate lunch at his desk. He left at exactly 6:01 p.m., 1 minute past the official end time, so no one could accuse him of clock watching. But not a second more, because he had a cat named Chairman Meow who would destroy his apartment if dinner was late. And most importantly, most critically, most fundamentally, Park Minjun did not, under any circumstances, interact with Director Kang Seojin. Director Kang was the kind of boss who made grown men cry in the bathroom stall on the 3rd floor, the one with the broken lock that everyone pretended worked fine. He was tall. He was devastatingly handsome in a way that felt almost offensive, like the universe had allocated beauty points meant for at least 4 other people and dumped them all into one sharp jawline and pair of ice-cold eyes. He wore suits that probably cost more than Minjun's rent. He never smiled. He spoke in clipped sentences that could slice through titanium. Last month, Director Kang had made the head of the marketing department redo an entire presentation because the font was spiritually incorrect. Nobody knew what that meant. Nobody dared to ask. So when Minjun walked into the office on the morning of February 14th and found an absolutely enormous bouquet of red roses sitting on his desk, his first thought was not, how romantic. His first thought was, someone is trying to frame me for something. What? Minjun said flatly, staring at the flowers as if they were a ticking bomb. Is this? His desk neighbor, Choi Yuna, was already leaning so far over the partition between their desks that she was practically horizontal. Her eyes were the size of dinner plates. Those, she breathed, are roses. I can see that they're roses, Yuna. Red roses. Thank you for the color commentary. On Valentine's Day, Minjun pinched the bridge of his nose. Is there a card? Yuna gasped as though he'd just suggested they rob a bank. You don't know who they're from? If I knew who they were from, would I be standing here looking like I've just discovered a body? Yuna practically dove into the bouquet, emerging seconds later with a small cream-colored envelope clutched in her fingers like she'd found the Holy Grail. She shoved it at him with the enthusiasm of a golden retriever presenting a tennis ball. Minjun opened the envelope. Inside was a card. Thick, expensive paper. The kind of cardstock that whispered, I have a black credit card and zero financial anxiety. On it, in precise, angular handwriting, were exactly 7 words. These reminded me of you. K.S. Minjun stared at the card. Then he stared at the flowers. Then he stared at the card again. K.S. he repeated slowly. K.S. Ooh. Do you know anyone with those initials? Yuna asked, vibrating with excitement. Minjun's brain, which had been operating at a very reasonable and functional level up until this point, began running through every person he knew whose name started with K and S. His college roommate was Kim Sung-hoon, but that man was married with twins and also lived in Busan, and also had once told Minjun that he had the romantic appeal of a damp sock. His cousin was Kwon So-hee, but she communicated exclusively through memes and would never use stationery this expensive, which left, no, absolutely not. Not in any universe, dimension, or fever dream. Kang Seojin. No, Minjun said out loud. No what? Yuna asked. Just, no. In general. No to everything. No to this day. No to these flowers. No to the concept of February as a month. He shoved the card into his pocket, sat down at his desk, and tried very hard to pretend the enormous roses weren't blocking his monitor. He lasted approximately 4 minutes. There's no way, he muttered, pulling the card out again. He examined the handwriting. It was neat, controlled, the kind of handwriting that belonged to someone who probably had strong opinions about pen brands. There's absolutely no way Director Kang sent me flowers. We have never had a conversation. We have never made eye contact for longer than half a second. The only time he has ever directly addressed me was 3 months ago, when he told me my quarterly report had the structural integrity of a wet napkin. That sounds like flirting to me, said Yuna. That sounds like a HR complaint. Same thing in some offices. Minjun groaned and dropped his forehead onto his desk, narrowly avoiding the vase. The roses swayed gently above him, mocking him with their beauty and their aggressive redness and their delicious smell that he refused to enjoy on principle. The thing was, and Minjun would rather eat his own stapler than admit this, Director Kang Seojin was the most attractive human being he had ever seen in his 27 years of existence. The man walked into rooms and the air pressure changed. He rolled up his sleeves during long meetings, and Minjun had once seen 3 people forget how to speak simultaneously. He had this habit of pushing his glasses up with one finger when he was concentrating, and Minjun had lost entire afternoons of productivity to that single gesture. But attraction was one thing. Attraction was manageable. Attraction could be buried under 7 layers of professionalism and denial. Receiving flowers from the man was an entirely different crisis. Maybe it's a different KS, Minjun told himself firmly. Maybe there's a Kim Sung-go in accounting, or a Kwak Sung-min in logistics. There's no Kim Sung-go in accounting, Yuna said helpfully. I checked the company directory. When did you check the company directory? Just now. While you were having your breakdown. I am not having a breakdown. Minjun, you're hugging a stapler. He looked down. He was, in fact, hugging a stapler. He set it down with as much dignity as he could muster. The morning proceeded in what could only be described as a slow-motion car crash of anxiety. Minjun attempted to work. He truly did. But every 7 minutes, someone new would walk past his desk, spot the roses, and react with varying degrees of shock. Whoa, Minjun, who died? Asked Jang Taehyun from IT. Because apparently in his world, flowers only appeared at funerals. Nobody died, Taehyun. Then why do you have funeral flowers? These are not funeral flowers. These are roses. Red roses. For Valentine's Day. Taehyun squinted at the bouquet. Then at Minjun, then back at the bouquet, as if trying to solve a math equation that didn't quite add up. Someone sent you roses? Thank you for the flattering emphasis on you. No, I just mean you're so. You know? Taehyun gestured vaguely at all of Minjun. You. Get out of my cubicle. By lunchtime, the entire floor knew about the flowers. By 2 p.m., the floor above them knew. By 3 p.m., Minjun was fairly certain a janitor on the basement level had heard. And through all of this, through the whispers and the speculation and the truly creative theories about who KS might be, Director Kang Seojin had not emerged from his office. Not once. His door remained closed. His blinds remained drawn. His aura of terrifying authority remained fully intact behind frosted glass. Minjun stared at that door from across the open office floor and thought, there is no way. There is absolutely no way. But the card sat in his pocket, and the handwriting was precise, and the roses smelled incredible, and deep in the disaster zone of his chest, his stupid, traitorous heart was doing something that felt dangerously close to hope. He crushed it immediately. Hope was a trap. Hope was a gateway drug to disappointment. Hope was what happened right before the universe drop-kicked you into a dumpster. I'm going to ignore this, Minjun announced to no one in particular. Bold strategy, said Yuna. Let me know how that works out. It did not, in fact, work out, because the next Valentine's Day, a full year later, during which Minjun had successfully avoided Director Kang with the dedication of a man evading the law, it happened again. This time it was not just roses. This time it was peonies. Pink peonies, to be specific. 24 of them. Arranged in a crystal vase that was so beautiful Minjun was afraid to breathe near it. They were lush and full and ridiculously romantic, and they were sitting on his desk at 8:47 a.m. when he arrived, as if they had materialized from thin air. The card read, Peonies symbolize prosperity and romance. You deserve both. KS. Minjun read the card. Then he read it again. Then he sat down very slowly, placed the card on his desk, put his head in his hands, and made a sound that could only be described as a deflating balloon. Round 2. Yuna shrieked from behind the partition. Yuna, I am begging you. He's back. The mysterious KS is back. Please lower your voice. This is the greatest love story of our generation. This is harassment is what this is. It's not harassment if you've been staring at that card for 3 minutes with hard eyes. I do not have hard eyes. Your pupils are literally dilated. That's because I'm having a panic attack. The office descended into chaos even faster than last year, because now there was history. Now there was a pattern. Now there was a narrative, and Minjun's co-workers, who were apparently all frustrated romance novelists trapped in corporate bodies, latched onto it with frightening intensity. A Slack channel was created. It was called #WhoIsKS. It had 47 members by noon. I'm telling you, it's Kang from the 7th floor, whispered Lee Ji-hoon from HR, hunched over his keyboard like a conspiracy theorist. Kang Seojin, the director. Think about it. KS Kang Seojin. It's right there. That's insane, said someone else. Director Kang doesn't have emotions. He was manufactured in a lab. Lab-manufactured people can still send flowers. Can they, though? Minjun wanted to die. Not dramatically. Not romantically. Just a quick, efficient, paperwork-free death that would excuse him from this conversation and also from the fact that he had, against every instinct of self-preservation, kept last year's card in the top drawer of his nightstand. He hadn't meant to keep it. He had intended to throw it away. He had walked to the trash can, held the card over the opening, and then his hand had simply not let go. As if the card had developed a gravitational pull. As if his fingers had unionized and voted against disposal. And now there was a second card, and it smelled faintly of expensive cologne, and the handwriting was the same. Precise, angular, confident, and Minjun was having what could generously be called feelings, and what could more accurately be called a complete emotional system failure. The worst part, the absolute worst part, was that Director Kang continued to show no sign that anything was different. Minjun had been watching, not in a creepy way, in a surveillance way, a professional, totally not obsessive surveillance way. Director Kang still arrived at 8:30 a.m. sharp, still wore immaculate suits, still terrified interns with nothing more than a raised eyebrow, still had never, to Minjun's knowledge, smiled at a living creature. During the one departmental meeting Minjun had been forced to attend that week, Director Kang had stood at the front of the conference room, delivered a presentation about quarterly targets with the warmth of an Arctic expedition, and had not once, looked in Minjun's direction. Minjun had checked. He had counted. 0 looks, 0 glances, 0 microseconds of eye contact. And yet, you deserve both. I need to transfer to a different department, Minjun told Yuna during lunch. He was eating convenience store kimbap with the desperation of a man trying to solve his problems through carbohydrates. Or a different company. Or a different country. Or, Yuna said, dipping her chicken into sauce with infuriating calm. You could just talk to him. Minjun choked on his kimbap. Talk to him, he wheezed. Talk to Director Kang. Walk up to the man who once made the CFO cry. The CFO, Yuna, a man who has weathered 3 financial crises. Walk up to that man and say, hey, are you the one sending me romantic flowers? Or is there another KS lurking in this building that I should know about? Yes, exactly that. Yuna. Minjun. He would destroy me. He sent you peonies. He would destroy me with peonies. Yuna stared at him for a long moment, then slowly shook her head with the expression of someone watching a nature documentary about an animal making very poor survival choices. By the 3rd Valentine's Day, Minjun had developed what he privately called the system. The system was simple. It had 3 rules. Do not think about Director Kang. Do not look at Director Kang. When February begins, start emotionally preparing for floral devastation. Rules 1 and 2 were broken approximately 16 times per day. Rule 3 was the only one that actually functioned, and even then, emotionally preparing mostly meant lying face down on his bed, while Chairman Meow sat on his back and judged him. This year will be different, Minjun told his cat on the morning of February 14th. This year, if there are flowers, I will simply not care. I will look at them and feel nothing. I am an emotional fortress. I am a wall of indifference. I am. Chairman Meow yawned. You're right. I'm going to lose it completely. He arrived at work braced for impact. The impact was worse than expected. Because this year, there were not just flowers on his desk. There were flowers everywhere. His desk was covered. The chair was covered. There was a wreath on his monitor. A garland draped across his keyboard. Small potted succulents lined up along his partition like tiny green soldiers. A miniature rose bush sat where his coffee mug usually lived. It looked like a botanical garden had exploded and specifically targeted cubicle 47B. Minjun stood at the entrance to the office floor, briefcase in hand, and stared. The entire office was already staring back at him, barely concealing their glee. Several people had their phones out. Jang Taehyun from IT was eating popcorn. Actual popcorn. At 8:47 in the morning. This can't be for me, Minjun stammered. Yuna held up a card. It was the same cream-colored stationery. The same handwriting. I know this is excessive. I don't care. KS. He doesn't care. Yuna read aloud, and the office erupted. There was applause. There were cheers. Someone in the back started chanting KS, 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 like they were at a sporting event. Jihun from HR was openly weeping, though he claimed it was allergies. Minjun wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. He wanted to dissolve into particles. He wanted to become one with the carpet tiles and simply cease to exist as a sentient being. Instead, he walked to his desk with the measured steps of a man approaching the gallows, carefully moved a potted orchid off his chair, sat down and opened his laptop. I am going to do my work now, he announced to the room. I am going to open my spreadsheets. I am going to answer my emails. I am going to pretend this is not happening. And if anyone, says the words secret admirer to me, I will commit a crime. The office went quiet for exactly 11 seconds. But Minjun, Yuna whispered. He said he doesn't care about being excessive. That's basically a declaration of crime, Yuna. She mimed, zipping her lips, but her eyes were sparkling with barely contained chaos. The morning was unbearable. Minjun could not reach his mouse without moving a vase. His keyboard smelled like lavender, which was lovely and infuriating in equal measure. Every time he shifted in his chair, a petal fell from somewhere. He was basically working inside a float from a flower parade. And then, at exactly 11:23 a.m., the worst possible thing happened. Director Kang's office door opened. The entire floor went silent with the speed and precision of a light switch being flipped. 47 heads turned. 47 pairs of eyes locked onto the tall figure emerging from behind frosted glass. Director Kang stepped out. He was wearing a charcoal suit. His hair was immaculate. His glasses caught the fluorescent light. He was carrying a folder. He walked across the office floor, toward the printer. He walked directly past Minjun's desk. Minjun stopped breathing. Literally stopped. His lungs went on strike. His cardiovascular system filed for bankruptcy. Director Kang passed within 3 feet of the botanical explosion that was cubicle 47B. He did not look at it. He did not look at Minjun. He did not slow down. He did not speed up. He walked with the same measured, authoritative stride he always had, as if there was not a small jungle growing on an employee's desk that he may or may not have been responsible for. He reached the printer, collected his documents, and walked back. Same route, same pace, same absolutely zero acknowledgement of the horticultural elephant in the room. He disappeared into his office. The door closed. The blinds fell. The office remained frozen for a full 5 seconds. Then Taehyun leaned forward and whispered, "Bro, that was the coldest thing I have ever seen." "That was the hottest thing I've ever seen," corrected Yuna, fanning herself with a manila folder. Minjun put his head down on his desk, on a bed of rose petals because of course, and quietly reevaluated every life choice that had led him to this moment. "We need to confirm it's him," Minjun said. It was March. The flowers had been distributed to various co-workers. Minjun couldn't take them all home. Chairman Meow would eat them and then throw up on his favorite pillow. Because Chairman Meow was a creature of spite, the office had settled back into something resembling normalcy. But the question lingered like perfume on a sweater. Was it really Director Kang? Minjun had spent the entire past month constructing arguments for and against, like a lawyer preparing for the trial of the century. Evidence for it being Director Kang. Initials match. Expensive stationery. The man wore $3,000 suits. Expensive stationery tract. Precise handwriting. Director Kang was known for his meticulous nature. The escalation pattern suggested someone with resources. Read. Director-level salary. Evidence against it being Director Kang. Director Kang had never shown any sign of being aware Minjun existed beyond the professional minimum. Director Kang did not seem like a person who understood the concept of romance. Director Kang once described a sunset as an inefficient use of atmospheric refraction. Minjun had literally never spoken to this man beyond, "Yes, Director," and "I'll revise the report, Director," and one mortifying occasion where he'd said, "You too," when Director Kang had told him to have a good weekend and Minjun had panicked. "I think," Yuna said, leaning back in her chair during their clandestine lunch meeting, at Minjun's desk, because Yuna refused to eat anywhere else now that it was ground zero of the office's favorite drama. "That you need to do some detective work." "What kind of detective work?" "Handwriting analysis." Minjun blinked. "You want me to analyze his handwriting? Think about it. You have 3 cards with KS's handwriting. All you need is a sample of Director Kang's handwriting to compare. And how exactly am I supposed to get a sample of Director Kang's handwriting without him noticing that I am, essentially, stalking him?" Yuna pulled out her phone and opened a note. "I've prepared a list of strategies." "You've prepared a strategy 1. Volunteer to take meeting minutes at the next departmental briefing and accidentally leave your notebook near him, so he has to write something in it." "That makes no sense." Strategy 2. Send a fake survey to his office email asking him to fill out a handwritten feedback form. "That's fraud." Strategy 3. Sneak into his office after hours and photograph any handwritten notes on his desk. "That's breaking and entering." Strategy 4. How many strategies are there? 11. Minjun stared at her. "Yuna, when did you prepare 11 strategies?" "I have a lot of free time during the 3 p.m. slump." "You're supposed to be doing your expense reports during the 3 p.m. slump. And you're supposed to be solving the mystery of who's sending you flowers. But here we are, both failing at our jobs." In the end, they went with a modified version of Strategy 6, which was, in Minjun's opinion, the least criminal option, obtaining a handwriting sample through a legitimate work interaction. The plan was simple. Minjun would bring a physical document to Director Kang's office for approval. Director Kang would sign it. Minjun would compare the signature to the cards. Simple, clean, professional. Minjun stood outside Director Kang's office door for 7 minutes before knocking. "Come in," said the voice from inside. And Minjun's entire nervous system lit up like a pinball machine. He opened the door. Director Kang's office was exactly what you'd expect from a man who described fonts as spiritually incorrect. It was minimalist to the point of austerity. Clean lines, muted colors, a desk so organized it looked like a museum exhibit. The only personal touch was a small succulent on the windowsill. A succulent. Minjun's eye twitched. Director Kang was seated behind his desk, reading something on his laptop. He looked up when Minjun entered, and for a moment, just a fraction of a moment, so brief that Minjun couldn't be sure he hadn't imagined it, something shifted in his expression. A softening, a warmth, like sunlight breaking through clouds for exactly 1 second before the clouds rushed back in. Then it was gone, and Director Kang was looking at him with his usual neutral, mildly intimidating expression. "Park Minjun," he said. "What is it?" "He knows my name," Minjun's brain screamed. "He knows my name. Wait, of course he knows my name. He's my boss's boss's boss. It's on the company directory. This means nothing. Calm down. I have the quarterly budget summary for your approval, Director." Minjun held out the folder with hands that were absolutely, definitely 100% not trembling. Director Kang extended his hand. Their fingers did not touch during the transfer. Minjun was simultaneously relieved and devastated. Director Kang opened the folder, scanned the document with those sharp eyes, and picked up a pen. Minjun watched the pen like a hawk watching a field mouse. Director Kang signed the document. Precise, angular, controlled. He handed the folder back. The numbers in Section 3 need annotation. Have it revised and resubmitted by Friday. Yes, Director. Minjun turned to leave. He had what he came for. The signature was right there in blue ink on company letterhead. All he had to do was walk out the door and compare it to the cards and either confirm or deny his theory and park Minjun. He froze, one hand on the door handle, heart in his throat. Yes, Director? A pause. A pause so long and so heavy that it seemed to bend the air in the room. The succulents, on your desk last month. Did they survive? Minjun turned around slowly. Director Kang was looking at his laptop again. Not at Minjun. At his laptop, as if the question was an afterthought, as if it was casual, as if it was the kind of thing one person just asked another person about for no reason. But his ears, and Minjun would replay this moment approximately 6,000 times over the following weeks. His ears were slightly pink. Yes, Minjun managed. I took them home. They're on my windowsill. The tiniest pause. Good. And that was it. That was the entire interaction. Good. One syllable. For letters. Said to a laptop screen by a man whose ears were pink. Minjun walked out of that office, closed the door behind him, and leaned against the wall. The signature matched. He didn't even need to compare it. He already knew, armed with the knowledge that his terrifyingly attractive, emotionally unavailable, font-criticizing, sunset-dismissing boss was sending him flowers every Valentine's Day. Minjun did the only rational thing. He panicked for 11 months straight. Every interaction with Director Kang, every departmental meeting, every email CC, every passing in the hallway, became a minefield of overanalysis. Was that nod slightly warmer than usual? Did he just almost smile? Was that email sign-off, regards, K. Seojin, flirtatious? Could regards be flirtatious? Was Minjun losing his mind? The answer to the last question was yes. Unequivocally, catastrophically yes. By January of the following year, Minjun had made a decision. He was going to do something he had never done before. He was going to send something back. This is either the bravest thing you've ever done or the stupidest. Yuna told him as they stood in the flower shop 3 blocks from the office on February 13th. It's definitely the stupidest, Minjun said, staring at a wall of flowers with the expression of a man defusing a bomb. What do I even send? Roses? No, that's too obvious. That's just copying his homework. Lilies? Too funeral. Tulips? Do tulips mean anything? What if I send something that means, I hate you, in flower language? Is flower language a thing? It's called floriography, and yes, it's a thing. Why do you know that? I've been preparing for this moment for 3 years, Minjun. I have a Pinterest board. They eventually settled on a bouquet of sunflowers. Bright, cheerful, symbolizing adoration and loyalty, according to Yuna's alarmingly thorough floriography research. Minjun wrote a card in his neatest handwriting, which was, compared to Director Kang's, the penmanship equivalent of a toddler with a crayon, but he tried his best. I figured it was my turn. PM. Short, simple, unmistakable. He arranged for the flowers to be delivered to Director Kang's office first thing on Valentine's morning. Then he went home, lay on his bed, and stared at the ceiling for 4 hours while Chairman Meow kneaded his stomach. I'm going to get fired, he told the cat. I'm going to get fired, and I'll have to move back in with my parents, and my mother will ask why I got fired, and I'll have to say, because I sent sunflowers to the scariest man in the company. And she'll disown me. Chairman Meow purred. It was unclear whether this was supportive or mocking. The next morning, Minjun arrived at work at 8:47 a.m. as always. On his desk was another bouquet. This time white camellias. Elegant, understated, gorgeous. The card read, Sunflowers. Bold choice. I approve. KS. Minjun's heart did something acrobatic and inadvisable. He approves. Yuna stage whispered from behind the partition, because apparently she had been crouching there like a nature photographer waiting for the perfect shot. Yuna, were you just sitting there? Waiting. I got here at 7:30. I brought coffee. And binoculars. We are indoors. But the catastrophe wasn't over. Because at 10:15 a.m., something unprecedented happened. Director Kang left his office. This in itself was not unusual. Director Kang occasionally emerged to use the printer, attend meetings, or strike fear into the hearts of employees who hadn't met their KPIs. But this time, Director Kang left his office, walked across the floor, and stopped. At Minjun's desk, the office went so silent that Minjun could hear the hum of the building's HVAC system. He could hear Taehyun's popcorn kernel hit the floor. He could hear his own heartbeat, which was doing its best impression of a drum solo. Director Kang stood there, tall and immaculate and slightly terrifying, and looked down at Minjun with an expression that Minjun could not for the life of him decode. Park Minjun, he said. Director. Minjun's voice came out approximately 2 octaves higher than usual. The sunflowers. Why yes. A beat. 2 beats. 3. They're on my desk. Yes, I sent them. To your desk. That's where I sent them. I can see that. Silence. The entire office was holding its collective breath. Jihun from HR had tears streaming down his face again. Yuna was biting her fist. They're the first flowers anyone has sent me, Director Kang said. And then, without another word, without a smile, without any change in expression whatsoever, he turned and walked back to his office. The door closed. The blinds fell. The office remained frozen for 10 full seconds. Then it erupted like a volcano of emotion. He's never received flowers before, someone wailed. The most powerful man in this building has never been given flowers. I'm going to sob. I'm already sobbing. Minjun sat at his desk, surrounded by white camellias, and thought, I am in catastrophic, irreversible, no turning back trouble. After the sunflower counterattack, something shifted. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. If the previous years had been a glacier, massive, slow-moving, terrifyingly powerful, this was the first crack, the first drop of meltwater. Director Kang began, acknowledging Minjun, not in any dramatic way, not with declarations or gestures or even full sentences, in ways so small that Minjun sometimes wondered if he was hallucinating. A nod in the hallway, not the curt, professional nod he gave everyone, but a slightly slower one with a fraction of a second of eye contact. An email about a project revision that ended with well done, instead of just acknowledged. A meeting where Director Kang asked for input from anyone in the analytics department and then looked briefly, unmistakably at Minjun. These moments were so tiny, so insignificant to anyone else, that Minjun felt insane for cataloging them. But he cataloged them anyway, in a mental file that was growing at an alarming rate. And then came the coffee incident. It happened on a Tuesday in April. Minjun was in the break room, operating the coffee machine with the bleary focus of a man who had stayed up too late watching cat videos. Chairman Meow was a content creator now. His Instagram had more followers than Minjun's. He wasn't paying attention. He was thinking about the quarterly analytics review. He was thinking about whether he'd remembered to water the succulents on his windowsill. He had not. They were dying a slow, waterless death, which felt metaphorical. He was thinking about, that machine pulls to the left. Minjun startled so violently that he nearly knocked his mug off the counter. He spun around. Director Kang was standing behind him, in the break room, where normal people stood, holding an empty mug of his own, looking at the coffee machine with a slight furrow between his brows. What? Minjun stammered. The machine. The portafilter pulls to the left. If you don't adjust for it, the extraction is uneven. Here. And then Director Kang reached around him as in his arm came within 6 inches of Minjun's body, and his cologne hit Minjun like a freight train of cedar and something warm and oh no, and adjusted the portafilter with a small, precise movement. There, Director Kang said, stepping back. Try it now. Minjun pressed the button. Perfect espresso flowed into his mug. Thank you, Director Seojin. Minjun's brain blue-screened. What? You can call me Seojin. Outside of meetings. He said it casually, factually, as if he were providing a weather update. Partly cloudy today. You can call me by my first name. Highs in the mid-50s. And then he made his own coffee. Black, no sugar because of course, and left the break room without another word. Minjun stood there for so long that the automatic lights turned off and he was left standing in the dark, holding a perfect espresso, having a spiritual experience. Yuna found him 8 minutes later. Why are you standing in the dark? He told me to call him Seojin. Who told you to? I'm going to faint. Don't you dare faint before telling me everything. By the 5th Valentine's Day, the entire company knew. Not officially, of course. There was no memo, no announcement, no formal acknowledgement from any party involved. But in the way that office gossip functions like a mycelium network, invisible but connecting everything, everyone knew that Director Kang Seojin and Park Minjun from Analytics were engaged in the world's slowest, most flower-intensive courtship. The hashtag WhoIsKS Slack channel had been renamed to hashtag KSXPM and had 156 members, including, reportedly, someone from the board of directors. Minjun had given up trying to suppress it. He had bigger problems now. Specifically, the problem of being hopelessly, completely, utterly in love with a man he had still never had a conversation with that lasted longer than 90 seconds. Because that was the absurd thing. Despite the flowers, despite the cards, despite the coffee machine moment and the hallway nods and the call me Seojin, that Minjun had never actually used because every time he tried, his tongue staged a coup and refused to form the syllables. Despite all of it, they had never actually talked. Not really. Not about anything that mattered. Not about the flowers or the feelings or the giant, screaming, flower-covered elephant that followed them both around the office. Minjun knew things about Seojin. He'd started using the name in his head, even if he couldn't say it out loud, from observation alone. He knew he took his coffee black. He knew he stayed late on Thursdays. He knew he had a succulent on his windowsill that was somehow thriving, the succulent equivalent of a teacher's pet. He knew his ears turned pink when he was flustered. He knew he ate lunch alone in his office every day, which made Minjun's chest ache in a way he couldn't explain. But he didn't know him. Not really. Not the way you know someone you're in love with. And the gap between the flowers and the reality was starting to feel less like a romantic mystery and more like a canyon he didn't know how to cross. So this year, Minjun made a plan. This year, he wasn't going to send flowers back. He was going to talk. Actually talk. With words. Like a human person. He just had to figure out how to do it without spontaneously combusting. Valentine's Day arrived. Minjun walked into the office. The flowers were there. White roses this time, simple and stunning and so heavily fragrant that his entire corner of the office smelled like a garden. The card read, 5 years. I'm still not tired of this. Are you? KS. Minjun read the card, placed it carefully in his wallet. He had started keeping them in his wallet 2 years ago, a fact he would deny under oath, and stood up. Where are you going? Yuna asked, immediately alert. I'm going to his office. Yuna dropped her pen. You're what? I'm going to Director K. I'm going to Seojin's office and I'm going to talk to him. Now. If not now, when? You're 10. You're 50. When we're both elderly and the flowers are being delivered to our adjacent rooms at the retirement home. Yuna grabbed his arm. Wait, Minjun. What are you going to say? Minjun paused. He hadn't actually thought about that part. I'll figure it out when I get there. That is the worst plan I've ever heard. I know. I love it. Go. Go. Minjun walked across the office floor. Every step felt like it covered both a mile and a millimeter simultaneously. He was aware of every eye on him. Aware of the whispers starting. Aware of Taehyun slowly lowering his popcorn bag with wide eyes. He reached Director Kang's office. He raised his hand to knock, and the door opened from the inside. Director Kang Seojin was standing there, coat on, briefcase in hand, clearly about to leave for a meeting. They were suddenly face to face, barely a foot apart, closer than they had ever been, and Minjun's brain performed a full system shutdown and emergency reboot. Seojin's eyes widened, just slightly, just enough for Minjun to notice. Up close, his eyes weren't cold at all. They were dark brown, almost black, and they had depth, layers, warmth buried under all that composure, like embers under ash. "Park Minjun," Seojin said, and his voice was different this close, softer, like he was adjusting his volume specifically for the distance between them. "Seojin," Minjun said. He said it. He actually said it. Out loud. With his mouth. The name felt enormous in the air between them, like a door swinging open. Something happened to Seojin's face. It was subtle, it was always subtle with him, but Minjun was watching so closely that he caught every microsecond of it. The slight part of his lips, the flicker in his eyes, the way his hand tightened almost imperceptibly on his briefcase handle. And then pink. There it was. The ears. Turning pink. Minjun started, and immediately forgot every word he had ever learned in 28 years of speaking Korean. His mind was blank. Not peacefully blank. Aggressively blank. The kind of blank that felt like opening a document you've been working on for months and finding it completely empty. "You," Seojin prompted. His voice was carefully neutral, but he hadn't moved. Hadn't stepped aside. Hadn't checked his watch. Hadn't done any of the things a busy director late for a meeting would normally do. "The flowers," Minjun said. "Yes. Every year. Yes. Why?" Came out smaller than he intended. Less confident confrontation, and more confused baby deer. But it was out there. The question. The big one. The one he'd been carrying for 5 years. "Why?" Seojin looked at him for a long moment. The hallway was empty. It was just them, standing in a doorway, having the conversation that neither of them had been brave enough to have for 5 years. And then Kang Seojin, the strictest director in the company, the man who had once described a colleague's presentation as an assault on coherent thought. The man who did not smile, who did not do emotions, who had been manufactured in a lab according to office legend. Kang Seojin smiled. It was small. It was barely there. It was the kind of smile that would be invisible to anyone standing more than 2 feet away. But to Minjun, standing 11 inches from his face, it was a supernova. It was the entire sun. It was every flower he'd ever received compressed into a single expression. "Because," Seojin said quietly, 3 years before the first bouquet, you held an elevator for me when everyone else let it close. And you said, 'Have a good morning,'" Minjun whispered, the memory hitting him like a truck. 6 years ago, his first month at the company. An elevator. A tall man he didn't recognize. Polite smile. Words said to a stranger. He'd forgotten. Seojin hadn't. "You smiled at me," Seojin continued, and his voice had a quality Minjun had never heard before, raw, unguarded, like a locked door left open for the first time. "No one here smiles at me. They're afraid, or they're performing, or they want something. But you just smiled. Like it was easy." "It was easy," Minjun said. "You looked like you needed it." Something flickered in Seojin's eyes. "I did." The silence that followed was not awkward. It was full of 5 years of flowers and cards and unspoken words and pink ears and perfect espresso and a single succulent on a windowsill. "I should tell you," Minjun said, and his voice was shaking slightly, but he was done being invisible, done being careful, done being a ghost, "that I have kept every single card you've sent me." Seojin's eyebrows rose. "Just a fraction. Every one. In my wallet. I carry them around like some kind of flower-obsessed serial collector. Yuna says it's unhinged." "Yuna? Your desk neighbor? She's been running a Slack channel about us for 4 years." "I know." Minjun blinked. "You know. I was invited to it last year. By someone named Taehyun." "Taehyun?" "He sent me the link with the message, sir. With all due respect, please just ask him out." Minjun made a mental note to either kill Taehyun or send him a fruit basket. Possibly both. "And did you?" Minjun swallowed. "Did you read the channel? Every message?" Oh my God. Your coworkers are surprisingly invested in our personal lives. I am going to pass away. I'd prefer you didn't. I have dinner reservations. Minjun's brain, which had been barely functioning, now stalled out entirely. Dinner reservations? Seojin adjusted his glasses. The gesture, the one-finger push that had haunted Minjun's productivity for years, and said, with the calm authority of a man delivering a quarterly briefing, I've had dinner reservations at an Italian restaurant for Valentine's evening for the past 3 years. Each year, I made them hoping that would be the year I worked up the courage to ask you. Each year, I went alone and ate pasta by myself while reading over my own budget reports. Minjun stared at him. You, he said slowly, Kang Seojin, the man who once made the CFO cry, have spent 3 Valentine's days alone at an Italian restaurant because you were too nervous to ask me to dinner. Seojin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I'm aware of the irony. You send people's presentations back for spiritual incorrectness, but you can't ask a man to eat pasta with you. I didn't say I was well-adjusted. A laugh escaped Minjun before he could stop it. A real, full, startled laugh that echoed in the hallway and made Seojin's ears go from pink to full red. I'd love to, Minjun said. Seojin blinked. You'd love to what? Go to dinner. With you. Tonight. At the Italian restaurant where you've been sadly eating solo pasta. The smile again. Bigger this time. Still small by normal human standards, but by Kang Seojin standards it was the equivalent of fireworks. I have a meeting, Seojin said, and his voice was back to its composed, professional cadence, but his eyes were warm, and his ears were still red, and his hand had shifted on his briefcase like he was stopping himself from reaching out. I'll send you the details. By email. By carrier pigeon, obviously. Minjun stared at him. Did you just make a joke? Seojin's expression didn't change, but the warmth in his eyes intensified by approximately 1,000%. I'll email you. 6:30 p.m. Don't be late. He stepped past Minjun, straightened his jacket, and walked down the hallway toward the elevator with the stride of a man who had absolutely not just been blushing. Minjun watched him go. Then he turned around and walked back to his desk. The entire office was staring at him. Yuna was standing on her chair. Taehyun had dropped his popcorn. Jihun from HR appeared to be praying. Minjun sat down, adjusted his monitor, looked at his white roses. So, Yuna demanded, practically levitating. What happened? Minjun picked up the card from this year's bouquet. Read it one more time. 5 years. I'm still not tired of this. Are you? He flipped the card over, borrowed Yuna's pen, and wrote on the back. Not even close. Then he looked up at his best friend, his accomplice, his unpaid romantic advisor, and said, I have a date tonight. The noise that erupted from Yuna's body was not human. It was something between a scream, a sob, and a victory cry. It was the sound of someone who had been watching a 5-year-long movie and finally, getting the ending they wanted. The office erupted. The Slack channel exploded. Taehyun cried into his popcorn. And Minjun sat in his flower-covered cubicle, holding a cream-colored card in hands that had finally stopped trembling, and smiled. Epilogue, Year 6. On the 6th Valentine's Day, the flowers did not arrive at Minjun's desk. The office was distraught. The Slack channel, now at 203 members and including the actual CEO, who lurked but never posted, went into crisis mode. Yuna nearly called the police. They're gone, she hissed, staring at Minjun's empty desk as if a crime had been committed. The flowers are gone. What happened? Did you break up? Did he die? Did you kill him? Yuna. Because if you killed him, I will help you hide the body, but I need to know now. Yuna. She stopped. Minjun pointed. On his desk was not a bouquet. It was a single flower, a white camellia, like the ones from year 2, placed on top of a small velvet box. Inside the box was a key. The card read, My apartment gets better light for the succulents. Move in with me. Bring the cat. Yours, Seojin. Yuna read the card over his shoulder. She screamed so loudly that Director Kang Seojin opened his office door from across the floor, looked directly at Minjun with an expression that was trying very hard to be stern but was failing spectacularly because he was smiling, and said, in a voice that carried across the entire silent office, "Is that a yes?" Minjun looked at the key, looked at the card, looked at the man standing across the room, the man who had sent him flowers every year for 5 years, who had eaten sad solo pasta at an Italian restaurant, who had remembered a smile in an elevator, who pushed his glasses up with one finger, who was terrifying and tender and terrible at expressing his feelings through any medium except horticulture. "Chairman Meow has very specific dietary requirements," Minjun called back. Seojin's smile widened. "I've already researched it." "Of course you have. Is that a yes?" Minjun held up the key. "It's been a yes for 6 years, you emotionally constipated disaster of a man." The office erupted for the final time. Jihun fainted, hit the floor, had to be fanned back to consciousness by 3 interns. Taehyun threw his popcorn in the air like confetti. Yuna cried so hard that she had to go home early. And Director Kang Seojin, the strictest boss in the company, the man who made grown adults weep, the man who was allegedly manufactured in a lab, crossed the office floor, stopped at cubicle 47B, and kissed Park Minjun on the forehead in front of 47 witnesses, a dying succulent and one very enthusiastic Slack channel. The company's official Valentine's Day party that year was, by all accounts, the best one ever thrown. Minjun brought Chairman Meow. The cat bit Seojin within the first 10 minutes. It was, everyone agreed, a perfect love story. The end.